Thinking. Oh, we got 52 people in the waiting room already. Good.
And we have a Zoom bummer.
Hope not.
All right, I'm letting everyone in. Let's see.
Oh, good. You're this shadowy person over to the side.
I can move over if you do.
I don't need you right now.
Oh, that's true.
I mean,
all right, welcome participants. It looks like we're downloading everyone in from the waiting room, so we'll just give it a minute. So you're all with us, but just want to let you know you are in the right spot for the noon hour webinar, our 7th annual Cheyenne Habitat Hero Workshop. We have Michelle Bohanan with us today for our winter sowing plant along, and I'll hand it over to Barb Gorgeous, one of our leaders on the Cheyenne Habitat Hero Committee, and she'll provide the introductions and make sure you have all your planting supplies with you today. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
okay. So, are we ready?
We are live.
Okay. This is the 7th annual Cheyenne Habitat Hero Workshop, Nature's Best Hope. And it's organized by the Cheyenne Habitat Hero Committee. And I'm Barb Gorgeous, and I'm a member of that committee. One of the things that the committee has done is plant demonstration gardens. There's one at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens, and there's one at the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities office if you get out and about. They still look pretty interesting in the wintertime. Our sponsors for the workshop this year, instead of charging people for tickets, we got grants from the Cheyenne High Plains Audubon Society and the Laramie County Master Gardeners and Community Wildlife Habitat Project West Edge District, which is actually a project through the National Wildlife Federation. And Audubon Rockies has been helping us with the technical aspect and the social media portion of this workshop. And this is, Audubon Rockies is the, the home of the Habitat Hero program, and Jamie, who started off, is the coordinator for that program. And Audubon Rockies covers Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. So if you're in those 3 states, you should think about going over to the website and finding out how to become a certified Habitat Hero. Then, most of you have been on these other meetings. If you haven't, don't worry. On Tuesday, we had Douglas Talmy, who's famous for writing about this whole problem of insects and the ecological balance and everything that we learned about on Tuesday. Yesterday, we had Jim Tolstrup, who explained to us how to garden with native plants on the high plains, which is where Cheyenne is. If you're not on the high plains, you would have to adapt a little bit. Today, we have Michelle Bohanan talking about winter sowing, and we called it a winter sowing plant along because when we do these workshops in person, that's probably one of the more fun parts of our workshop is people get their hands in the dirt. So if you have the supplies, you can plant along with Michelle today. Michelle is a Laramie County Master Gardener. She's also a member of our Cheyenne Habitat Hero Committee. She's really into saving seed and swapping seed and all that kind of thing. And she is the one that if you made a donation and you opted to get some seed, she will be the one that will be communicating with you. And so we will be doing that. We have a couple housekeeping things here. Everyone should get a wrap-up email tomorrow, and I'll have links to the recordings of all the talks, the videos, links to the sponsoring organizations, and links to the speakers organizations in case you missed any of that. Yeah, we don't have any handouts otherwise. And just a reminder, if you made a donation, you'll be hearing from Michelle to find out about what kind of seed she should send you. And we have noticed some technical issues with with people getting emails from Audubon Rockies, for whatever the reason is, if you do not see the wrap-up email by the end of the day on Friday, you need to email me or Jamie, and we will get you that. We'll pass on that wrap-up email to you. And then to back up a second here, we will have the chat box open. If you have questions, you can go ahead and type them in there. Jamie is moderating today, so she will deal with all those questions, and when Michelle's presentation is at an end, then we will have the questions. So we sure appreciate you coming. You know, this is not just about pretty flowers. We're hoping that people will plant native pretty flowers and help out wildlife and people as well. So with that, I'm going to unshare and we'll move on.
Thanks, Barb, for providing all that great info for everybody. Just a few questions that already came in. I'll reshare those emails again. I know there was a few people that wanted to see the emails again, so I'll include that in the chat box feature. And then just a few webinar etiquette rules. We just kindly ask that you keep your phone lines muted. They should already all be muted, but we're also tech savvy now. We do know how to unmute them. So we just kindly ask that you keep them muted and making sure your video is turned off, just because for legal reasons, we like to be able to share these presentations through to our friends or colleagues and on our website. And we do need to have the video feature off for the participants. With that said, I already started the chat box feature. So if you have questions or comments, technical issues, feel free to use that, and I'll provide or compile all the questions for the Q&A at the end. And again, we will send that reminder email by end of day tomorrow with all those presentations from this week and important links. So I'll kick it off for Michelle. She is up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and she is not only a master gardener there, but an integral member of the Cheyenne Habitat Hero Committee these past 7 years, helping to put on workshops, help with planting events, donating her native seed, and of course her knowledge and time giving presentations for the Habitat Hero program over the years. So we kindly thank you for all your hard work and passion in planting these previous years. And with that, Michelle, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll start off with a supply list and make sure everyone that's planting alongside with us today have the tools in hand.
All right, well, thank you, Jamie and Barb, and thank everybody for joining too, and also for the donations too. We're really looking forward to sending out some seeds to everybody. Hey, you'll notice me twitching around. I have two helpers here. One is on my lap. I don't know if anybody's ever done any work without a cat on their lap, so if you see that, that's why. And my husband is helping to make sure the cameras all behave themselves. So, and I hope too that you enjoyed Doug Tallamy's and Jim Tolstrup's presentations yesterday and the day before. As Barb mentioned, we are going to do a live hands-on winter sowing plant along, and many thanks to Barb for the catchy title. Then we will do a little bit of potting up to show what the next steps for your seedlings might be once they do come up. So you might be wondering, what is winter sowing? And the very short abbreviated version is many types of seeds require the freezing and thawing action of winter to break their dormancy. And it's part of their survival mechanism, and it helps them germinate when their chances of survival are highest. It wouldn't be, for many plants, it wouldn't be good for them to germinate in September right in time for the freezes. Other plants germinate at that time on purpose. But with winter sowing, we're mimicking nature, but on a very tiny scale. So we're attempting to protect our seeds and seedlings from the hungry birds and squirrels and bugs and slugs and so on. There are as many variations of winter sowing as there are gardeners, but all you need to get started are the container. And a lot of times I use milk jugs just because I have them, but lots of variations on that concept. Scissors, marker toothpick for picking up seeds. I think our supply list said to use a piece of paper or have a piece of paper. I'm using a yogurt cup lid. It's just a place to put your seeds, and so that you'll be able to pick them up with the toothpick and then put the unused seeds back in the container, the packet. We'll have potting mix. This is a potting mix, not potting soil or garden soil. So it's usually a soilless mixture that is better for containers and lighter. I'm gonna have to remove the cap. And also seeds. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna switch the cameras. You're going to see a green screen for a second here. Aha. Trying to pin so I can see what I'm doing. And it's not really working. Okay, well, we'll do that. Okay. So I am going to be sowing Penstemon and Palmery today. I really love this guy, but all of my plants had a close encounter with an excavator when our water line broke. And so now I'm going to try to grow some replacements this year. You can see we've commandeered the kitchen table. That activity may or may not be amusing to your housemates. Fortunately for me, my dear husband is a good sport. So, grabbing the container, I'll do my best to keep my hands out of the shot. For starters, when I talk about the lid of the container, I don't mean the screw-on plastic lid. I mean I'm going to be talking about the top of the container. And first off, putting holes in the container is a good idea. In my case, I don't do that because I oftentimes bring the containers into the house for one reason or another, and then I'll have water dripping down a windowsill or something because I've inadvertently watered a holy container. Even so, best practices dictate puncturing the containers. Now, you can try poking your scissors through there. People use a drill, a melon scooper, maybe it's not a melon scooper, but anyway, one of those things will work. In my case, if I have to do it and I've already sewn the container, I'll just cut like so. And that'll get the holes in the container that I need. Then we will mark the container. How do I spell it? Just one I. And these ones are coming from my garden. So today's something like the 14th. I'm going to plant in a grid of 16. And I think these are from my 2016 garden. I'll fix it here in a minute. But that's how I like to mark the container so that I know what I've planted and how I planted it. The other thing I typically do is mark how I germinated the seeds. So in this case, I'm winter sowing them. Sometimes it'll be warm room temperature for 1 month, out to patio after that, or something like that. Whatever method I happen to be needing to use for those seeds. So I start there. And then you cut the container, just like so. And if you're using a milk jug, you can thank yourself now if you rinsed it. Okay, so the soil depth is usually more important than head space up here. And so I like to cut these as deep as I can. Typically you want 3 inches minimum if possible. This can be more important for the deep-rooted seedlings and a little bit less important for the shallow-rooted seedlings. If you have very deep-rooted seedlings, these half-gallon milk jugs, or in this case a cider container, you can see you gain another inch or maybe more. Can anybody see that? Which way is this? You can gain a little bit of space, another inch or 2, depending on how high you cut it. And that's really nice for deep-rooted seedlings. It's nice for some of the alliums that like to pull themselves all the way to the bottom of the container, things like that. All right, so I'm going to scoop some potting mix into the container. I'll be right back. What you can't see is I have a tub of moistened potting mix on the floor here. No, that's okay. That's fine. Okay, thank you. And you level it just a little bit. You don't want to pack it down. Just level it. You want all these nooks and crannies and whatnot. And then you get your seeds. And tip a few seeds out here. Now, I'm going to plant in a grid just of 16, and I'll show you, you can plant more seeds or fewer seeds, but there are different problems that come along with more seeds or fewer seeds, and I'll show you that when we move to the potting section. So again, we've got kind of our fluffy material here, and it'll settle down a little bit as it freezes and thaws during the winter. And that's okay, but the light, loose material allows the seedlings' roots to penetrate. It has the oxygen in there that the seedlings need, and allows the water to infiltrate a little better too. So here we have seeds in the top of a yogurt container. Thank you, honey. And you'll see that I'm touching the potting mix a little bit. I'm just getting the toothpick moist. And the reason being is because then, I don't know if you'll be able to see it well, but I can then pick up a seed on the end of the toothpick. And if you're working with seeds that are too small to do this, don't worry, you can pick up multiple seeds and put them in there as groups or not, whatever is going to work for you. So anyway, I usually do a grid, and then I'm going over here and I just figure I'll do a 4x4 grid. And notice that I'm not poking the seeds down. I'm just, a lot of times you just kind of roll the toothpick along on the surface of the potting mix and the seed will come right off. And you want the seed to still have access to light. A lot of times they need light for germination, but they need the humidity around them, so good contact with the soil. So, I don't know if that one fell off. Sometimes I lose count, so I have to adjust my seed count on the front of the container. add a question mark to it or whatever. The reason I do a grid is sometimes then I'll change my plan for potting, and I'll have an idea of where seedlings have emerged and which ones haven't. So if I got a little bit off track, so they won't be perfectly uniform, but they'll hopefully do their thing. Okay, that might be 16, that might be 15, I don't know. So then the reason for your yogurt cup or your piece of paper is then so you can make a yogurt cup taco or fold up your piece of paper and put your seeds back, assuming that we haven't got a bunch of potting mix in our seeds. So our unused seeds can go back into the container, the packet where we got them from. And this is obviously, as you can see, one of the penstemons that I would be able to share. Looks like it's from 2017 garden, not 2016 garden. Thing about penstemons is sometimes they germinate a little bit better when they're older because they do have quite a bit of germination inhibitors in them. And so as that starts breaking down, they germinate more readily. So then here we have the top or the lid, top half of the container. And you will see on the links that Barb and Jamie or whomever, the follow-up email, the links that you get to some winter sowing sites. Some people will run tape all the way around this and set them out that way. Some people, when they're cutting their container, they leave this hinge. They don't cut this in the back or whichever side. In my case, I have good luck just cutting the whole works off and then fitting this top piece down into the bottom piece. Really not that hard, I'm just making it difficult. And just like that. Then I have one winter sown container, first one of the year for me, I'm way behind. And then we say, well, what do we do with the container? That's fairly important to figure that piece out. You might have to experiment a little bit in your yard to find the best place for them. Generally, that best place will be outside for the rest of the winter on the east or north side of the house. So the west or south side will usually be too warm, and you might find your seedlings are cooked one day. You also want to avoid putting your seedlings under a drip line. You might find your seedlings doing backstroke after a good rainstorm. In my case, I'll put these containers on our east-facing covered patio, so they'll get good light there. And as we discussed a minute ago, most seeds do need that for germination. They're also fairly well protected from the wind. Now, when we grow things in the house, a lot of times we have concerns about how do we harden the seedlings off for after we've had them in the house and they've been babied along. How do we harden them off? Well, typically they've already been hardened off for the sun, but they're not hardened off for the wind and the lower humidity. And once they have germinated and I'm getting warmer days, sometimes if it's really warming up, I'll start hardening them off by turning this top half of the lid kind of cockeyed. That's assuming the wind isn't blowing too much. And then they're getting accustomed to a little less humidity than they have had. Maybe I'll put it back on if it's going to get very cold. And then after a few days, after the seedlings are looking fairly robust, and I'll show you some examples of brand new seedlings and some that if it were the right time of year, I'd be ready to take the lid off. Then when they're good and hardened off, the lid comes off and I wouldn't put them in direct sun or wind there immediately, but they're well on their way to becoming plants in your yard. So let's see if we can, no. Jamie, let me know if you think it's a good time to stop for questions before we go to hot potting, or if we should go straight into hot potting.
Yeah, let me ask a few questions that have come in that pertain to how you're preparing the soil. The first was, could you give a good recommendation for either a store-bought potting mix or the recipe that you like to use for potting mix?
Sure. I have made my own, and I never could get to the point where I liked it as well as the Pro Mix that I use. And the actual answer to this, though, is use whatever potting mix you can get along with. Again, I happen to use Pro Mix. My husband, oh, no, I guess I can't. Later on, we'll try to remember to turn the camera over. That's okay. Okay. It's, we'll try to take a picture of the Pro Mix. My aunt can use Jiffy Mix and get along with it just fine. I'm completely unable to use that. But most of these soilless mixtures are going to be a mix of perlite, vermiculite, and peat moss. And so whatever it is you get along with, go ahead and go with that.
Perfect, that's super helpful. And then one other, can you just repeat the common names of the plants that you were planting today? Or the seedling?
Oh, I think it's called Palmer's penstemon, but it's so penstemon palmery.
Perfect. And then let's see, about watering, is the potting mix slightly soft or wet right now? And do you also add water once you're finished?
So I've got the potting mix fairly moist, and part of the reason for using as deep of a container as I can is the surface won't remain soggy. You do have to kind of figure it out. The holes in the bottom will help you, and if you get it too wet. But if during the winter the dog decided now to go out, if during the winter things have dried out, then I'm glad somebody asked, because where I usually do water is right down here. So I'll just run some water right down here if I need to during the winter or the spring later on. And you can kind of tell by weight. You get accustomed to your potting mix and how much potting mix you have in here and how approximately much it should weigh. And you can tell if, hey, that container's light, I should add some water or plenty of water in there. And again, if you're putting holes in the container, your overwatering is not as big of a problem as it is for me if I overwater.
Michelle, this is Barb. I was just going to mention where I put mine, the snow accumulates on top of them, and so I never have to water. And it's good that I have the holes in the bottom, because the one jug I forgot to last year, everything floated to the top, so it works.
Yeah, I've had that too. Yeah, if the wind is blowing sideways, it will end up in our patio, and then I will be having to cut holes in the containers to get them to dry out a little bit.
Perfect. And what I'll do, Michelle, I'm still compiling some questions that might make sense for a little bit later on. You haven't gotten to it yet about storage and what you do when you put them outside. So we'll let you keep doing your tutorial, and I'll keep compiling the questions. So keep bringing them my way.
All right, so I will switch back to the other camera, and we will do some hot potting. Okay, here I've got a lid from well, it's actually the lid from my Rubbermaid type tub that I use for my potting mix that I keep it moistened in. So I want to show a couple different seedling stages here. So let's see. I had 6 Aquilegia canadensis, and I think it might be red Columbine or something for a common name. But at any rate, just I had 6 seeds that I caught this year. You can see 2020 garden. So I went ahead and sowed those. And sure enough, they started coming up. 5 of them germinated, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one that germinated disappeared. This one didn't show up. So pretty little. The thing about winter sowing is you typically don't need to mess with these guys. They can stay in the container for quite a long time. I will show you a little bit about how to hub pot these. Even if, just in case you need to, we'll go ahead and up pot a couple of these, maybe all 4. And then we talk about, so that's when you don't have too many problems. So here's what you get. We call this the seedling brownie, and this is actually just the wheat that we plant to hopefully keep our cats from eating the house plants. So this can happen though to you if you put all kinds of seeds and then you're blessed with all of them germinating, and then you're trying to figure out, oh boy, how do I up pot this? Do I try to separate these? What do I do with them? In this case, we don't have to worry about it because it's just what the cats are eating. This is another seedling brownie that I made. These are just cosmos. This is the bipinnatus. I don't know what we call, just one of the common cosmos that blooms in the whites and pinks and whatnot. And anyway, so that would be another seedling brownie, but it's a little bit easier to deal with than my cat grass was. So I'll show you how we do that. And then these are some kind of a palm. You can see that the cats have been chewing on them, so obviously the pot of wheat hasn't deterred them. I wanted to show this because sometimes the way the root system is going to determine how you're going to up pot. This was just an experiment from my in-laws' place in Phoenix. I wanted to see what happens if you plant palm seeds, and sure enough, what happens is they sprout and then you have plants you don't know what to do with. But now I do know what to do with them. We'll use them as part of our up potting demonstration. And I don't know how much of this we'll do. If you don't get to your plants to up pot them, these are some that I planted last January 4th. I sowed the seeds last January 4th. And some came up. I got way too busy. I never got them up potted. I never got them planted out in the garden. So here, I don't know, a month or 2 ago, I thought, well, maybe they will be a good demonstration for the up potting class. You can see a calendula or something has come up in the middle of where the little columbines are reemerging. So we'll work on those. They have you can't really see it because the container's dirty, but they have quite a root system going. So that'll be a little bit different up potting work that we do for those. And that's probably plenty, but I did want to give a shout out. This is Monardella Mccrampa, and somebody else is going to have to come up with a common name. It might be something hummingbird related. It's more native west of us, but I wanted to give a shout out to Jacob Mayers at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens for setting me up with seeds. So I sowed 16 seeds on November 7th, and 9 came up. 8 have stayed with me. They're very cute at this stage. Looking forward to hopefully not killing them. They already are very, very pungent smelling. So I'm really hoping to keep these guys alive. Pretty happy with them. Okay, so where shall we start? Let's start with the little tiny Aquilegias. So what will happen here, you kind of want to match the size of your pot to the size of your seedling. And in this case, this is just a 2.5-inch pot. And you notice that I have this filled up quite a ways with potting mix. And you're going to be thinking, how is she going to water it? So here's my secret weapon here. My gravy separator that doesn't hold water anymore. All right, so what we do here is I'll use this little spoon handle as a dibble. See if this works. Keep my fingers out. And you can kind of start moving the dirt, potting mix, to where you can tell that you're not stabbing the roots. Good, so I get an idea of how big the root ball might be already. And then I make a little hole here. I'm going to hopefully place the plant when I get him out of here. So out he comes, about like so. Goes right down in here. I didn't do a good job of matching up the size of the hole, so I'll start over a little bit. And to see where to put my hands. Okay, now we'll set him down. Kind of settles into place right there. Move some of the potting mix around. There we go. All right, and the reason for setting him up a little bit higher is as soon as I water him, he'll settle down. The potting mix will settle down a little bit, and he'll be just about the right height. So I give him a gentle drink with the gravy separator full of water. Oh, it's now running on the floor. And so that helps settle the soil around the root system and make sure that there's not a big gap of air around those roots. Thank you. So we'll set those guys aside. Oh, I forgot something important here. You want to make sure that you mark your plant label. These are just cut up orange juice containers here. So I'll write this. And I'll just write that I uppotted one, and I usually use an arrow to show that I uppotted it on 1/14/21. And I'll probably go back here a little bit later and uppot the rest of those guys. And that way I don't have two containers hanging around. Okay. So let's go ahead and play with the Cosmos. Kind of a seedling brownie, not the worst there's ever been. Now with something like this, I think you can see there are all kinds of roots going all over the place on this one. So I overplanted it on purpose, and you can see what happens. So what I'm going to have to do is I try to get my fingertips in contact with the soil and tip it out. I don't know of any other way to salvage a mess when I make one like this. And if you have something valuable that you think you're going to hurt by tipping it out, go ahead and tear the, cut the milk jug container or whatever it is apart.
Show the root system.
There, how's that? That kind of explain why we wouldn't be able to just prick the little seedlings out because they've run all over the place. So then, what I'll do with those guys, they're going to need a little bit of a larger container. So they actually don't do very well in the house, but they were good for doing this demonstration. So this is, what is this, about a 3-inch pot, and that'll keep them entertained for just a little bit of time. What I will do, if I've made a mess like this, I know it sounds terrible, but I have an abundance of seedlings here, and so I will just start separating it. Now, you will have some losses if you've done this to yourself, and usually the strongest survive, not a problem. So then I start saying, well, how many containers of Cosmos do I really need? I have far more here than I really need. So I'll start moving those around and get to the point where I'm happy with a group. And I've tipped most of the potting mix out of this pot and set them in, and then start adding potting mix behind, backfilling a little bit. Looks like I put one in there upside down, and that's okay. Start filling. Normally, I don't make as big of a mess with my seedlings, but it happens. This isn't the best job I've ever done. Pretty close to the worst job. But there we have a group of Cosmos, and most of them will forgive you and keep growing, and you'll still end up with way more than you need. Later on, if you decide you do need to thin them after they've had a chance to decide who's going to stay with you and who isn't, it's typically better just to clip them off than it is to try to pull them out, because you saw how the roots were going all over the place. They'll just end up disturbing all of their neighbors. So there you have the Cosmos. Push them out of my way. I don't really need Cosmos growing in January. And we'll grab these Columbines. I think we'll have the same thing going. We'll tip them out, see how they look. These Columbines, you can see they're not so happy to have spent all summer and all the winter so far in their milk jug. Not really the best way to treat them. This is about the freshest new root there is. The rest of these aren't looking so great. And it's possible because it belongs to this calendula. That might be what that's doing. Looks like there's a pepper that has decided to sew itself in. But at any rate, when I've grown these and sewn them in a grid of 16, like I did with these, I can typically, if I've left them go for so long, I can typically break them apart. And now would be a good time to say, you don't necessarily have to hot pot. You can plant these directly into your garden early in the spring. So looking here, even though the roots aren't all that happy, this is very fresh and healthy here. This upper piece of the root, high stem. And so that's a good sign. So I like to make kind of a divot in my pot where he's going to go, and then hold him up. And typically I'd have my other potting mix sitting here in front of me, but I'll just use this. And then I start backfilling around, keeping him kind of high again in the pot. Covering him back up to that stem that I exposed earlier. And then when I water him down, he should settle back down to the proper height again. And if I find later that he needs a little more backfill, I can do that. Yeah, looks like I'll need to do that. But oops, he'll keep settling down there. And then I'll mark all of these guys, and they'll have their very own pot instead of this multi-plant apartment going. So I kind of am thinking that that's going to cover most of the common things you're going to encounter when you're up potting. What do you think, Jamie? Would we take some questions now and see what all I missed telling you?
Yeah, let me ask a few questions regarding weather more than anything. The first one is the wind. When you have, do you have problems with the tops coming off due to wind?
Almost never, partly because in my case, I'm growing on the east side of the house, and it's under an open but covered patio, so there's quite a bit of protection there. And sometimes the wind will get a hold of it, but again, almost never. If the potting mix is pretty well filling it, and if the potting mix is good and moist, it's fairly heavy too. And so usually the wind doesn't try to take them and isn't successful in taking them.
That's helpful. And then another question regarding weather. When you put the jugs outside, can you repeat the parameters? Do you want no direct sunlight and just ambient light? And would you recommend the west or the north side?
So the north side or the east side is best. So the west side, that hot sun that we get in the afternoon, is pretty tough on these. You can imagine if you're using this, it warms up like a mini greenhouse. And so you're going to warm it up too much. Sometimes that'll either inhibit the seeds from germinating, or if the seeds have germinated and we get a stretch of hot days, hot winter days that we sometimes get, that west sun or that southern exposure, either one of those can cook your seedlings. So north side of the house, east side of the house, something where they're being hit, but not all day and not the most intense part of the day either.
Would it work putting the jugs into an unheated greenhouse, or do you recommend leaving them outside?
I have done that in a hoop house, and I was unhappy with the results because the hoop house gets so warm during the day. And so I did get the easier things to germinate, but the things that needed a little better care didn't like the hoop house warming up, I think, to 100 degrees in the daytime, the jugs warming up. And then of course they cool off at night, which doesn't really bother them. But those hot daytime temperatures weren't so good. An unheated garage, I think, would be pretty good. You wouldn't have to worry about the snow blowing in, but you do need some light. So if you have a window in your garage or a couple windows in your garage, that'll give the seeds the light that a lot of them need to germinate.
We'll just do one more question. You know, what are the advantages of using this technique versus just doing broadcast seeding, say in the spring or summer?
So, well, if you don't have many seeds and you do have many seed eaters, you might not get the plants that you would like, that you would hope. You're able to protect your seedlings and control the germination a little bit better. If you have enough seeds, and it is a type of plant that prefers to germinate and grow where it landed, then that is a nice way to go if you can. You can kind of control the conditions. You can know whether or not the seeds are going to germinate and whether you need to leave the space bare. When you go to plant the plants themselves, you'll know what you're able to plant there, where you might have planted seeds that either they didn't germinate or the mice got them all or the birds got them all. You'll be able to plan your space, your plantings, a little bit better in that regard. But I do like to direct sow in many cases if I'm able.
That's really helpful. Well, what we'll do, if you're good with it, we'll keep doing the tutorial. Keep sending me your great questions, and again, I'll try and compartmentalize them, and we'll break again for more Q&A.
Dandy. All right. Well, I will go ahead and see what kind of mess I run into by trying to tip these palm seedlings out. So switch the camera and get a green screen. Okay, let's see what these palm seedlings look like. Oh, wow. Well, this is fun. So look at those big fleshy roots. I have done this to myself before too with something called agapanthus. I think it's a Nile lily or something like that. And this isn't quite as bad as what I did with the agapanthus. What I had to do in that instance was go out with a tub of water and swish the seedlings up and down, up and down, up and down in the tub of water for a very long time to rinse the potting mix away from the roots and to then untangle the roots. And every single one of them forgave me. I did not prepare to swish a palm in a tub of water. So here we are. Oh, isn't this interesting? I don't know if we'll be able to see it, but here's the seed, the original seed. And so it germinated. And so that would be hypogeel germination, meaning it germinates under the soil. And then, so it germinated, and then it sent its leaf up, and the cats chewed on it, and then its roots down. But the seed itself and the all of the nutrition that's in that seed then also has, it's probably depleted by now. Yeah, it's pretty well depleted by now. So it's empty. But while the plant was just a baby, it was using the nutrients out of that seed. So this is not tough. It's turning out as far as a plant that you want to hub pot. It's probably a little easier. In fact, the potting mix is shaking easily away from the roots. So if you run into a situation like that, probably you'll tip almost all. You probably might use a bigger pot, but this is what we have here in the kitchen. And you will set your, yeah, this pot is way too small for these guys, but you can see a good example of what not to do. There. So a lot of times then, when I'm in a situation like this, then I'll just kind of hold it sort of like chopsticks here. I can't turn my hand far enough, but hold the plant kind of like chopsticks and then start dropping potting mix over it. just like so, to where it can stand up. Just like him to be a little bit high if I can. And I'm out of water in my leaky gravy separator. But then, as you can see, when you water him down, he all settles down more or less, maybe even a little lower than I intended. But so I am going to have to find somebody to adopt a whole bunch of palms, because obviously the palms that are growing in Phoenix are not going to be very happy here in Cheyenne. So,
Neither was a lemon tree.
no. I guess we'll dump a little bit more potting mix in here. And I've been curious to see how these little Monardellas look. I think it might be called hummingbird mint or coyote mint or something like that. Maybe somebody can look that up. But at any rate, it has a lovely tubular red flower that the hummingbirds like. It stays low growing. And you see I have a fork here. The best tools are the ones that you stole out of the kitchen. And just because I think the root system has not taken over too much, I feel like I should be able to prick him out with a fork, but we will see. So here we go. Just shake him a little. If you're getting too much resistance, it's time to tip him out upside down, like what I did with the palms. But at any rate, not too bad. There we go, not too bad. And you know, he's starting to get a fairly good root system. So that helps me know how much potting mix to start with in the pot. A little bit more because I want him higher. There we go, that should be about right. Sitting high in the pot. And there he goes. And I can do more of the same, or we can talk about other things. What do you think, Jamie?
Let's do some questions. We got a few questions regarding pests and rodents, and then also we're talking about what seeds work best for winter sowing. So there was a few participants asked these same questions. So let's talk about that. How do you avoid and combat fungus on the seedlings? And then also, how do you protect the plants from rodents, specifically little mice?
Yeah, little mice. Now, I'm going to set this over here. I should have done that earlier. So fungus, not typically a problem. I'd be interested to know what kinds of fungus might be showing up for some people sometimes, but it's not usually a problem with the winter sowing. And it's not that the potting mix that we're using is sterile or anything like that. Sometimes you will get a, you know, the green moss across the top, or algae, one of the two, growing on there, but it's not bothering the plants. It typically the plants outgrow the moss. And once you set it out in Wyoming, that doesn't last long. So haven't had the fungus problems or the damping off. You can get some damping off if you do have too much water going on. Maybe the drainage in your pots needs to be a little bit higher or something like that. The mice, and actually squirrels are a big problem in our yard, but they have not been interested in the containers. Now, slugs and slugs are another thing. Sometimes they will, the slugs will just climb up the side of the container and go in, and then they have their own personal buffet in there. I like iron phosphate for that. I've been pretty happy with that. And the squirrels and mice in these milk jugs have not been a problem. The one time I did have a problem was I was using the hoop house, and then I was putting another hoop over top of that, a mini hoop, to just start some flats. And the mice thought that was just wonderful because it was nice and warm and snuggly, and here were all these pots of salad for them. So they haven't been interested in the milk jugs. Mice and squirrels will do whatever. So I don't have that problem usually, so I'm not an expert there for the most part.
Let's see, we got this question a few times. Can you just list off some of your favorite plants for seedlings that actually do really well with this process for winter sowing, and any vegetables you'd recommend as well? Would this process work for veggies?
It does. And actually, I'm glad you said that, because you could use the milk jugs for anything. You can, if you want, you can start seeds that don't need winter sowing in your milk jugs, in the house, outside, wherever, on the patio, under lights. And yes, I've winter sown tomatoes, and it probably would work better if you had a much longer season. It would be a better bet. They take a little bit too long for me anyway, the way I'm doing it. So I don't really winter sow the tomatoes. The veggies like the kale, they're happy coming up. Some of your lettuces will do that, spinach, those kinds of things. Any of those little things you could have yourself, well, kind of the same thing that the cats have going. You could have your little lettuce containers going. They like the cool weather, maybe not freezing weather, but you'd have several clippings of lettuce out of a milk jug container. And plus, it's also easy to, we talk about rotating pastures when it comes to the cat grass. So we have multiple cat pastures going at once. You could have multiple lettuce milk jugs going so that you could keep harvesting new ones and letting the other ones regrow. So a lot of the cold loving veggies are a good bet for winter sowing. The thing is these are kind of things that can take care of themselves. And when you have to go and baby your petunias or your tomatoes or whatever else it is you're doing, the winter sowing containers are pretty much just taking care of themselves, and they're not demanding attention the way some of the more tender items are. And then as far as plants that like to be winter sown, almost any of our natives like that freezing and thawing, that scarification over the winter. So I think Jim Tolstrup was talking about the Mentzelia decapetala. I think it's called 10-petal blazing star. That's one that likes to be winter sown. Almost all of the penstemons, that's their survival strategy, is to be winter sown. Let's see. Oh, he also, I was taking notes, so I'm looking at them. He also mentioned that his Cleome cerulata, which is that Rocky Mountain bee plant, that's a favorite. And in fact, I don't know that you can get that one to come up without it having winter stratification. But it's also one that is a lot happier. If you get your starter, your first plants, let that one go to seed and self-sow, and it'll be your friend and put on a wonderful show. But if you don't have enough seeds to direct sow, winter sowing is the way that I finally got my start of that plant.
Great, that's super helpful. We'll do a few more questions and then we'll get back to your hands-on portion. These questions pertain to soil. I found this one interesting. Can you reuse soil, the potting soil in the containers year to year? Or do you then pot the container into the ground as is?
So, so reusing the soil like in the container, usually, I didn't really do it so much today. When I'm potting, the soil that's there with the seedlings ends up in the pots if I'm up potting them, or if I'm directly planting them into the garden. I'm usually, for instance, I only planted 4 seeds or I only got 4 seeds, I might separate that out into 4 blocks, bricks, and then plant those out. And so when I have containers where I've up potted and I still have potting mix left, then I don't usually reuse it for germinating seeds. One, because then maybe the late germinating seeds that I missed or something like that will be popping up in something else, and I don't really want that because I probably will have forgotten what it is. And also, it seems like I might be asking for trouble to be reusing it for seed starting. I do use, if I have winter sown containers where maybe I was not lucky and I didn't get any seedlings or only just a couple, and I'm not holding the container over for another season to try again, then I don't mind using that to fill up a pot of, you know, something that I'm just growing over the summer, or dumping it in the garden, or up potting something else. So different things, a lot of different things you can do with them. The soilless mix does tend to break down over the course of the year, and it won't stay as friable, and it'll compact a lot more quickly. So it's good to switch it out for new seedlings, for new seeds.
That's a really good answer. That's very helpful. Thank you. We'll do one more question on soil and then we'll get back to you. When the potting mix comes, do you pre-moisten it before putting it into the milk jug, or can you explain your watering technique one more time?
Yes, that's a good idea. We might switch cameras or not. Maybe we'll switch cameras and then show the mess that I've got now all over the kitchen here. Just a second to get a green screen. See what we can see. Okay, well, okay, for starters, there's the potting mix that I happen to use. It's a BX. There are several different formulations that ProMix does. One is HP, high porosity, and it has a lot more of the perlite, so it drains pretty quickly. What I usually do here is, excuse me. No, I'm going to move that back.
Turn on that light on me. What?
So what I typically do is have my, over here, have my tub of potting mix or for potting mix, and then I just kind of dig the dry potting mix into the tub like so, and then I'll go over to the sink and just run water into it and start stirring it up. And this, it's a little bit wet right now, but you can kind of get an idea of the consistency. And I think I could probably squeeze, yeah, I can squeeze quite a bit of moisture out. That's a little bit wet. What I usually do is when I have the potting mix in the container, can you tip that down, honey?
Sorry.
There we go. What I will usually do is I'll have all this potting mix wetted up, and then I'll kind of dig this well here in the corner, and that way if I have too much water, it'll kind of collect here in the corner, and I can fill my pots from up here where the water has kind of pushed out and is no longer as saturated as it is there. So I don't know if that if that helps a little bit there, Jamie.
That does. It's always so helpful to see, you know, the hands-on portion.
Okay.
And it's up to you. We can keep going with questions, or if you have more to show.
Let's do questions unless somebody wants to see us redo. I lost my chair.
No, we have plenty of questions, so I'll keep going with them.
Yeah, let's.
All right. What time of year do you classify as winter for this process? Can you do it as early as December? Can you do it, you know, March, April?
Right. So sometimes we run out of winter, and some plants need more winter. Some seeds need more winter than others. Typically, you can start as early as November because that's when winter does start, or October or whatever. But a lot of times if you can get your seeds sown, winter sown by January, February, or March, if that's what you have left, then you'll be just fine. There are some plants that typically, well, that are said to need 5 months of winter sowing. And I've pushed that when I've run out of winter. I've used a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to scarify them just a little bit more. The other thing you can do if you run out of winter is use the refrigerator or the freezer, cycle in and out of the refrigerator or freezer. Use the coffee filter method in the refrigerator, those kinds of things. So it's really quite flexible. That's part of the idea, is set it and forget it for the most part.
Perfect. All right, let's talk about seedlings. Let's see. What did you mean by when you said the germinating seed should be well on their way? Could you describe what that should look like for them to get planted?
Oh, yes. So, they're all over the floor.
I love your cat.
She's the center of attention.
She seems chatty. Every so often we hear meow.
Okay, I'm going to sit back down. I need to work. So, remember Jim Tolstrup mentioning that the native seeds or the native plants aren't going to look like much. For the most part, not all of them. Your native plants don't love to be in a pot. And so when we were looking at these guys, this little Columbine, because, and maybe I'll switch, or I can just do this. These little Columbines, they're kind of small. They look kind of small, and yet when we were looking at that, he had a fairly good stem on him, and plus he's a year old. He would probably be just fine going out. And when you put them out, makes a difference, because if you put them out in July and it's going to be 80, 90, 100 degrees, they're going to struggle more than if you put them out in April or May. There's always a chance that that we can put them out in April or May, and then suddenly it decides it's going to go to 20 below, in which case they could be injured. But most of our natives are going to prefer being planted out in a cool spring over being planted out when they're bigger, but when it's the temperatures are so hot. So this little Columbine is well on his way. I would, and that's another thing about the winter sowing. This little Monardella, he's well on his way. If it were April or May, I'd probably give him a few weeks in the pot just to recover from being ripped apart in whatever I might have broken when I potted him. And then I'd be happy to put that one out. This little guy that just germinated, that's not well on his way. He wouldn't be ready, even though they will self-sow, and naturally when they're growing and planting themselves, they're going to be this size. But that probably would be a bad bet as far as thinking that that was going to have a high survival rate if I put those out.
Yeah, that visual is helpful, and that's an important note to make, that our native plants establish a strong root system before putting up their shoots. What's the phrase? First year they sleep, second year they creep, and by year 3 they're leaping.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's partly too why I think both of our speakers mentioned that it sometimes can be difficult to find the native plants in the nurseries. One, because they're harder to grow, they're harder to get people excited about buying this little stick.
Yeah.
$10 and that kind of thing. So yes, the starter plants, they are just so much, they just can establish so much more easily. You saw how these palms looked with their roots circling round and round and round. Sometimes when we have that big, beautiful plant at the nursery that's been living in a pot for however long and then pushed with fertilizers, because that's how they have to get it to grow, to look good, to entice people to buy it, is going to have a pretty tough time establishing out in the big flower bed where conditions aren't as beautiful as they were in the nursery.
Sure. All right. When do you collect your seeds? When's a good time of year for that?
That is almost a summer long and fall long endeavor. So as the seeds mature, you're going along, you just kind of notice as you go by that, hey, those pods are swelling. Now they're getting tan. Oh, now they're starting to separate. Now's the time to go grab them. And some will take all summer long. Like if you were doing iris or something like that, they bloomed in the spring, and come September, October or something like that, you're thinking, okay, are you going to mature in time for me to pick you this winter? I don't know. But others are much, much quicker. Kind of like dandelions. I think if you blink, they've gone to seed overnight or something like that. Those are some of the quick ones.
And then what do you do once you collect the seeds until winter sowing? Do you just put them in plastic baggies, or where do you keep them in the meantime?
So I like to let them air dry, and typically, I don't think I have anything. Sometimes my winter sowing containers end up with seeds in them, and a piece of paper to identify what the seeds are. But anything that you can put the seeds in, hopefully the cats don't help with that. Put your seed label in there. They have good airflow, so they don't mold on you, which they easily can do, even in our climate. Other times, those big aluminum roasting pans that a lot of times the caterers will use, those are really nice for the like penstemons that are on a long wand. So I'll like to clip those, lay them in the roasting pan, and then later, as they continue maturing, then shake them loose. Almost everything becomes a seed collecting container once you start getting desperate. And in our case, we lock them up in the guest bedroom, so we're not allowed to have guests because there's seeds in there, and that keeps the cats from helping too much. And as they mature and as I get time, then I separate them down. As we see the penstemon, you can see there's some chaff in there. So the penstemon seeds, the chaff, the seed pods are about the same weight as the seeds themselves. So sometimes getting the last of that chaff out is not worth the time. We can tell the difference between seeds and chaff. But shake them down, use whatever method we have to separate and clean the seeds. And we do just fine in these little plastic zipper bags after they're good and dry. You wouldn't do that the day you collected them. Now, someplace that had actual humidity in the air, they can't even get their seeds to dry in the first place, and they certainly would never put them in a plastic bag. But we get away with it on the Front Range, we can do it. And ours live in the cool basement year round, so they keep a long time too. It's 50, 60 degrees down there, and that helps the seeds survive a long time.
Seed sources. Can you talk about some online retailers or local seed libraries, seed swaps, any local groups that people could check out?
Oh. Yes, let's see here.
Other than your yard, can people come to your yard? Your beautiful yard, Habitat Hero Garden.
So, okay, here are a couple favorite sources. So, Alan Bradshaw doesn't have a paper catalog anymore, but his website is allplains.com. So, ALPLAINS.com. And what he does is he goes around the country, and he keeps threatening to retire, but he goes around the country collecting seeds. So this whole catalog, and now his whole website, there's not pictures, but just listing after listing. And if you want penstemons, he probably has the most extensive collection of penstemons we might ever encounter. So I like that very much. And I have Jennifer Thompson to thank for putting me onto Alan Bradshaw's site. I don't mind Prairie Moon Nursery or Prairie, either one. They're kind of more Midwest, but there are a lot of native seeds and plants. But you can get quite a few native seeds from there. I do not spend hardly any money on seeds anymore because I trade with people. And again, like Jacob Mayers was nice enough to set me up with the Monardella Mccrampa, but other people too. There's a place on a site called garden.org where we do a big swap where 40 to 60 people will offer their seeds up, and then we all can trade with each other. And if you're not careful, you will accidentally go home with 150 new to you packets of seeds, which is way more than you really meant to have happen. But it's a nice way to share also with new gardeners too. Hopefully most years I send off far more packets than I claim, and that sort of makes my husband happy, but not as happy as he could be, I guess.
Nice. And you can also I've included in the chat box those websites, allplains.com, Prairie Moon Nursery, and garden.org. Also check out your local library. A lot of them have seed swaps as well. I don't know if you've had luck with that in Cheyenne.
We haven't done it extensively. We do have the seed library in Cheyenne, and we offer a lot of our seeds from our gardens. But the thing there is our seed library is geared more toward beginning gardeners, and some of the native seeds are a little fussier than some of the more common ones that beginning gardeners can be successful with. And that's what we want, is people to be successful and to be happy and to get confidence and come back and do it again.
Nice. We'll do one more question on seedlings and then we'll switch gears. We got this question throughout the program. So could you address growing shrubs with this technique? Have you had any luck with mountain mahogany, scrub oaks, currants, rose hips, anything of the like?
So yes, that's great. In fact, many of our woody shrubs, trees and whatnot, they do want that winter scarification, stratification. And this works really well. For the smaller ones, I use just your little milk jugs for your smaller seeds. And those where the shrub isn't going to need to run a root down several inches to start with, they're just fine, and I pot them and away they go. And for some of the bigger ones, I'll just use a #1 pot and then pot them up and mark them and just leave them out. I don't even bother with putting a lid on them. They'll just be the #1 pots. And I think, so that tree outside of the library, it's some sort of a, what is it? Anyway, I'm losing my mind. Not outside of the library, outside of the hospital. I've collected those buckeyes there. It's some kind of an Ohio buckeye, but it might be a hybrid. And those germinate really nicely, winter sown, just in a pot. I think I've had, I don't know what kind of oak is the thing, but some friends gave us oaks or acorns. And so they popped up really nicely, winter sown, some of the bigger ones. Looking forward to some shagbark hickory. I think it's Caria ovata or something like that. And I'm looking forward to getting those. I just traded for those last week. Hope to get those in another week or two, and hope I have enough winter left for them to come up for me, winter sown.
Well, let's see. I'll ask you 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll talk about next steps for folks to get their seeds. All right, let's talk about storage. Temperatures. What is the optimal temperature range if you are using some sort of mini greenhouse? I know that's not the recommendation, outside is best, but do you have any inkling on temperature ranges for a greenhouse for storage?
For a greenhouse for storage, for
the pots.
Oh, for the pots? For our natives, I don't know, I might not answer the actual question that was asked. So we do have a sunroom and just an enclosed porch, the old porch on the front of the house on the west side. And like the little bitty columbines that I was showing you, they don't need as much cold. And so I just put them in the sunroom, and it warms up during the day, but it will freeze, but not usually hard. It doesn't usually get less than 30 degrees out there.
Oh, perfect.
And so that's enough chilling for something like columbines that don't need too much freezing. Now, does that
That's helpful. So if this individual is still on the call, so I think 4 degrees would be a little too chilly then.
Oh, well, for stratification, no. You do want the freezing and thawing.
Okay. Well, their temp range is from 4 to 40 degrees in their greenhouse.
Oh no, that would be great. Really.
That's good. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That would be great.
Oh, good. Okay. Let's see. We'll do 1 more question. Talking about snow and weather. So you showed in the beginning, so you have the bottom pot and you stick the top inside of it. And when you put that outside, how does the snow get in for moisture if you have that top piece on the jug?
Sure. So typically what is happening, so not a whole lot is coming in through here. Some can, especially if you put this under the drip. However, the snow is, if this winds up under snowdrift, then the snow is filtering in down this way and getting down in there and hopefully coming out the holes in the bottom if your containers are where they're getting snow. So that's one way that's happening.
Perfect. That visual is very helpful. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, and Michelle is awesome because not only did she donate her time today to go through this program, kind of step by step and answering a lot of your questions, she is also going to be sending you native seeds for individuals that donated more than $10 for this workshop series. So Michelle, I'll let you kind of preface those next steps as far as you sending out a handout for people to complete, what questions that you'll be including on the form in the process for getting those native seeds.
Okay. Well, I think what I can do is I've put together a list of some seeds that are fairly appropriate, I think, for our area. However, I think there are people tuning in from farther away. So what I think I will do is compile this list and include just a snippet about each plant and a picture, if I can, that says this is good for part sun, moist, dry, whatever. And then send this list out to people and then ask people to choose, say, I don't know, their top 3 or their top 5, because we don't have huge quantities of all the seeds. We only have a few of some are in kind of short supply. But if you would send your top choices, then I would be able to fulfill based on your top choices. And if you have additional questions, then email me back and say, hey, I'm torn between Aquilegia chrysantha or Aquilegia cerulea. Which one should I get? And one's the yellow one that likes it a little drier and a little sunnier. The other one is the blue one, the Colorado 4 o'clock, that likes it a little cooler and a little shadier. So those are things that you can ask me for more specifics on. And I think we can go from there. And I think all of your contact information Audubon will already have from your registration.
Perfect. And just to be conscious of your time and the participants' time, you know, we've come to 1:30. We could talk all day about this. You're so informative. You've made it easy to understand. Michelle, you're a great presenter on this. So I really appreciate your time and your knowledge in answering all those tough questions. And I just want to say thank you to Barb, if you want to chime in as well. We are so grateful for all of you wanting to tune in this week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we had a great lineup of speakers. We could not have done this without the help from the Cheyenne High Plains Audubon Society. This committee rocks. And it's been a great turnout. Every day we've had a plethora of participants. The first day was over 170, the second day over 180, and today we had about 120. So people are interested in this, and you are what hope looks like to a bird, and we really thank you all for joining us. And Barb, I'll let you chime in as well.
Oh, fine. Well, I knew last year about this time that it would be really great to get Douglas Talamy, and we also knew that he doesn't really want to travel out here. That's a lot of time when he's got so many people asking for his time. So we had already decided to do a webinar with him. We didn't really know much about webinars, but it's kind of funny how it worked out a year later that we are now quite expert at this means of communications. So if we get back to in-person workshops next year, maybe we'll have to set up a camera so that everybody can come who doesn't want to drive all the way to Cheyenne. We'll have to see how that goes. But if anybody has any great ideas for a theme for next year, this year it was taking the reason for having native plants in your yard from somebody who lives back east, and then interpreting that with Jim Tolstrup for the plants that grow on the high plains, and then the nitty gritty, and the grit part is, you know, intentional, of how to get these things to grow in your yard, how to start from seed. Because if you try to grow them from plants in a pot, you know, that's a pretty expensive proposition. I'll just tell you real quick, 4 years ago, we got a grant for, gosh, I don't know how much, to plant the Board of Public Utilities garden, several $1,000s to plant that. And right about the same time, the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens said, hey, we have this little plot, would you like to make it a Habitat Hero garden? And we didn't have any money for it, but I had done about 25 milk jugs of winter sowing. I had kind of, you know, taken on more than I could fit in my own garden, and said, oh, well, I guess we'll put it over there. And yesterday we had a rabbit discussion. Well, the rabbits came and ate everything we planted that spring. And funny thing is, about half of it came back the next year once we put up a fence. So anyway, so yeah, winter sewing is the affordable way to do it. And so everybody who came, thank you so much. And if you remember to email me, I can put you on the Cheyenne Habitat Hero email list. We put out a little newsletter about every month or two, and we certainly would let you know what next year's workshop is about.
Perfect. And be on the lookout by tomorrow afternoon, the full recap of all 3 presentations and links and all of that. So be on the lookout for that. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so
Jamie.
much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Bye-bye.